Hi everyone, it's me here, and today I am actually filming together with Sarah Hopwood in your studio, which has been great. So she's been interviewing me, but now I'm going to interview her.
Yay!
Because you're a specialist in emotional intelligence, and this is really interesting. So we want to hear more about what you do. Can you briefly just explain what it means?
Yes, so it comes from a history based around my own journey in life, and very often deep learning, personal learning, takes place either as a matter of choice or it takes place as a result of crisis. And for me, it was the latter. And I really had quite a difficult time some years ago, and I just, in my perspective, felt that things couldn't get any worse, and I realised the only person who could create a change was me. The world wasn't going to change around me. So I realised I needed to find a different way of thinking about things. I had already started to identify that some of the problems that I was experiencing were actually caused through my own actions, and I started to learn a little bit about filters. And when somebody talked to me about filters, and the sentence was very, very simple, and it was basically, we will always filter what supports our belief system. And it was positioned with the fact that there is so much out there in the universe, there is so much noise going on around us all the time, that none of us can process all of it. So as human beings, we will always wire, or we are wired to then filter, because we can't absorb it all, we will filter what, if you like, sits comfortably or what makes sense to us. And so therefore, that is then linked to our belief systems, which took me on a journey. And my journey started where I realised I have to find a new way of thinking, because the rights and wrongs of things that had been done wrong to me or things that I had done wrong, none of my tactics, if that's the right word, or coping mechanisms were actually being very successful. And that was the beginning of my self-learning into emotional intelligence, and I just absorbed it like a sponge. I read like mad, I Googled, I asked questions, I put myself in the presence, in the room with people who were talking about emotional intelligence and different ways of thinking. And I learned and learned and learned and learned, and so moved myself then into what I call as a specialist on the subject, and then put myself out there as a professional speaker and business consultant, not just talking about emotional intelligence, but talking about how emotional intelligence and thinking emotionally intelligently can actually help with team building, conflict resolution, negotiation skills, selling a business, setting up a business, marketing, sales. And you use it, you go into those platforms using emotional intelligence and thinking about responding, choosing what you want, understanding communication, what you're reading, seeing and feeling from other people, and benchmarking it more against a place of suspension, thought and understanding, rather than knee-jerk emotional response, which is where we all take offence. We all, 9 times out of 10, make the wrong decision and wrong response because of how we have taken offence. And so then we set ourselves on a journey where not only was the first decision wrong, but then every decision after that supporting that decision is all wrong. So it's a bit like the business of putting your ladder against the right wall, and you make sure you do it early, you fail early, and get in there and think emotionally intelligently, which I believe then protects us personally, but also in our businesses.
So important, isn't it? And it's coming. It's thankfully coming into businesses. So that's what you help doing. You go out into organisation and large corporations, and you teach them emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I mean, there's one, and also smaller businesses too. So I have helped people set up. And what I'm always looking for is an entrepreneurial spirit in the person, and also that they are solution focused and not problem focused, that they operate in the circle of influence and not the circle of concern. And a good way of assessing that in a working together interview is listening to how the person is speaking, listening to the words that they're using. And a very quick tip is, if you're in that boat, you're thinking of employing somebody or you're considering whether or not to work with someone, ask them for in 5-10 minutes just to talk about their journey. How have you ended up here today? And they will very, very quickly reveal whether they are solution focused or problem focused, blame focused or influence focused. It will ooze out of them in their chosen words, their demeanour, their eye contact, their breathing. And you are then thinking, do I want this type of thinker in my business? Do I want this type of thinker to be my client? In other words, you're testing, will they deliver on what we've agreed on? Will they just come up with repeated excuses in a journey? The train was late, I broke my leg, I this, that and the other. In other words, sorry mister, it wasn't my fault. And you then have to weigh up whether that would be easy to challenge and change to help them think more emotionally intelligently, or whether it is so embedded in their thinking that I always believe, can a leopard change its spots? Yes. Please don't ever believe they can't. There are many stories of people who have had very, very damaging ways of thinking that have been able to move out of that space. And many of them with good reason, by the way. A very good example of that is abuse. And I'm not belittling abuse in any way, shape or form, but there is nothing about abuse that dictates to you that you have to live a post-abusive life. I know it's I've lost many people in my family, so, a sense of loss is huge, and my life is still very different now to if my parents and my brother were still around. So I'm not saying we're not affected, but it ties up with learning to live with, letting go, moving forward, and actually stamping your feet and saying, yes, that happened. Yes, it was wrong. But I am not going to let that dictate who I am moving forwards. And emotional intelligence doesn't finger point. It's facilitative and it empowers people to think differently. So going back, when you're listening, when you're watching, whether you want to work with that person or whether you're going to employ them, the ease of changing it if what you're seeing doesn't fit with the core values of the business and the mission of the business, and the question, do you want this thinker in your business, and how much teaching would it take if it is at all possible for you? I always believe somebody can change it, but it may not be you. It may have to be that someone else has to have that influence.
Super helpful.
Yeah.
For a woman who's setting up her own brand, going out there as a personal brand, so maybe not with a big team and employees, going out there on video, we've talked about this previously, how important being authentic is and how that ties in with EQ. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I think the first thing that I would say is do not in capital letters, compare yourself to other people. That's the biggest mistake that people make, and that statement does sit alongside neuro-linguistic programming, which is about mirror and matching and what have you. And what I did was I did put myself in the room with people who thought and behaved the way that I wanted to think, and it was tied up with fake it till you make it and all those things. So mirror and matching is very different to comparing yourself to somebody else. And the word compare is the enemy to the word authenticity, because you cannot, by definition, be authentic if you are consumed with comparison. And, as a speaker, people say, and I've been terrible against other speakers, so I'm not saying I'm the best, but I've had people say, I wish I could speak like you. I wish I could do it. And my answer all the time has been, yes, you can. And I said, because the key element that you need is authenticity. If I'm sat in an audience listening to somebody, my buy-in to them, my response and engagement to them is basically whether I believe them, whether I can trust them. And I can only measure that against my litmus test as to whether I think you're being authentic or not. So if I look and I'm watching you and I think you're copying Richard Branson, or you're copying, I can't remember her name now, on Dragon's Den, Everybody Wants Her, and she's from Brighton actually too, Deborah Meaden, if you're copying, then all I will identify is, ooh, you're copying. But, I've seen, if you like, not very well rehearsed speakers. I've seen speakers who have just set out on their journey, who have captured me, won me over. I've even bought a badly written book with terrible pictures in it that after reading it clearly wasn't proofread properly, based on the authenticity of that person who was engaging with me. So, be authentic, be you. Do not compare yourself to somebody else. Be the best that you can be and stop winging it.
Perfect. This sums up so much
Stop
of
winging
my
it.
coaching. It's brilliant. Absolutely on spot. It's so important.
Sally Gunnell says 70 or 75% of all success is tied up in preparation, and too many people don't do that. They don't prepare. And the last image I'd like to give you is I want you to picture success as a person. And that person is hovering over you as you're trying to do what you're doing. And please remember this sentence. Most people give up at the point of success, at the point of conversion. So when you're on your journey, being authentic, and you will trip and fall, and is it Edison that said, I know, WD-40, do you know why it's called that? Because 39 attempts weren't successful. Okay, so never give up. And I want you to picture success above you when you're thinking of giving up, above you, looking down, going, no, don't give up, because success is there looking at you going, you're nearly there. And also in business, which is newish now, which is really important, and it is tied up with, if your ladder is against the wrong wall, you need to make a change. And there's two things you need to ask yourself. Do I keep persisting, or do I pivot? And it's that word pivot where you almost pitch on your heels and just turn slightly and do something slightly different. Maybe lift your ladder and adjust it somewhere. But don't give up.
Wonderful. Isn't she good? So Sarah influenced my work a lot. I came to you, didn't I, when I was just starting up the Blog Academy, and she was extremely helpful, as you can tell, very knowledgeable and very focused on progress and getting your business there and being brave and authentic. So I love all of that, and it resonates deeply with me. So thank you so much for all the support you have given me at a very important point when I was at a step where I could easily have just either pivoted or given up, and I just felt that no, this is the way I'm going, and stepped up. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's really, really both interesting and important, and I'm glad this is entering the corporate world.
I'm delighted
as well.
And just before we go too, at the same time I was working with you, me put together my show reel, which came as a recommendation from the speaking world. As a speaker, it's quite good to put a show reel together, and that has sat on my website for a number of years, and without a doubt that would have contributed to clients that have come my way. So thank you too.
The importance of video need to be updated.
Absolutely. Yes, it does.
All right, thank you. So much fun today being in your green studio as well, and we have a fantastic result here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mee.